Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the House of the Dragon podcast with myself and my co-host Ben, the
Hi.
expert on Game of Thrones. Ben,
Yeah.
what will we be doing today?
Well, talking about House of the
Talking
Dragon.
to the mic, please.
Yeah, talking about House of the Dragon. yeah.
Yep, we're going to be talking about the next episode of House of the Dragon, episode 2.
Yeah.
Like the similar to the last episode before, we'll be talking about having a little overview, then talking about the books, Dragonwatch. Then I'm going to talk about medieval history, and then we're going to finish with a character of the week.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Without further ado,
what
the
happened?
episode.
Yeah, what happened this week?
Now, this week was an interesting one. It's a lot more difficult, I think, to describe than last week's, because last week's was very straightforward. But this week, we have, basically, Daemon is in Dragonstone, kind of being a bit of an arse.
He's just chilling and being moody, really.
Yeah, and he has stolen an egg,
Yes.
which is typically then given to a child when it's given.
Yep.
And it's a kind of direct kind of jab at the whole heir succession.
It is also, the egg is seen as a bit of another sign of legitimacy within the Targaryen family.
Got you.
But yeah, he's stolen an egg. We see Otto wanted to go over Corey's. We see a lot of political from Corey's Valerian this week. We see him attempt to marry his daughter. Him talking about the stepstones and the crab feeder, which I'll go through more in the books and what we see in that. And just being a lot more involved than last episode, which I like because I think he's a brilliant character.
Yeah, 100%.
We see the King Viserys announce that he's going to marry Alicent Hightower, the daughter of the Hand of the King. Yeah, Rhaenyra is his best friend, but again, not really a thing in certain things. But yeah, and do we see much else, or is there just a lot of character development in this one?
I'd say it's majority of it is character
There's
development.
nothing wrong with a show choosing to develop its characters for an episode and being less plot worthy, because that's what makes the show like. You're not there for the plot most of the time. You're there for the characters.
And we get obviously that little bit of a dragon off, a little bit of conflict, almost a fight at the end.
I don't think it would have ever been a fight, to be honest, from knowing their relationship.
Fair
Right.
enough.
So we just.
Go
Is there
straight
anything else? Are we missing anything else in the show? You watched it like more recently in time than I did.
I did. I think that was it really.
Yeah. Right. So the first thing we see in the books is Daemon take over Dragonstone. So that doesn't really happen. It's more of a he goes to RuneScape, not RuneScape. No.
RuneScape.
I'm trying to think. His wife is a Royce, who live in a place called Rune something, but can't remember which one. So in the Vale, he goes to the Vale, and then he gets bored, and then he fucks off to the Free Cities, and he's living in the Free Cities. It's kind of like a guest, kind of like a I'll burn you down with dragons if you don't let me stay here.
Got you.
And he does steal an egg.
Ah.
And unlike but the books that this is based off are based like a history book, not a point of view character book.
Okay.
So in the books they say, oh, we had a baby, but the baby died. That's why he stole the egg. But obviously in the show we see him go, he'd never had it. She was never pregnant.
Yeah, he's gonna have a baby.
But like, she can't have a baby. She mentions that she can't have a baby.
Right.
Which this paramour does stay. She just stay in the plot for longer than you think she would.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because she turns out to be quite useful in certain ways. But yeah, according to that they never have a baby, but according to the books she does have a baby. But again, the books are based in a history style with three main sources. There's the court jester, known as Mushroom, who's a little dwarf man. There's a septum, who is a female religious figure, normally like a nun. And there is the Grand Maester of the time, the one we're seeing. I can't remember his name. But there are three sources in the books. And then it's all written by another Maester.
Ah, I got you.
Who came up as a Maester afterwards, as well as there's a couple more little sources, but there are three main sources. So in the book it's like a history book, and these are like the Maester who wrote it has a tendency to agree with some of the sources more and disagree with some of the others. But he will still mention what they said about events.
Got you.
So yeah, we've got that in both the books in One Knife and Fire. And then I also think we'll talk about the Triumphy, the Kingdom of the Three Daughters, or known colloquially as the Kingdom of the Three Whores, which is three of there's Valerian, which is the family, and Valerian, which is the culture.
Okay.
And it's annoying.
Yeah.
Because George R. R. Martin says them wrong. Which he does a lot, actually.
Yeah.
But that's because of his, like, tangy accent.
Yeah.
So three of the Valerian colonies, Myr, Tyros, and Lys, who are all based on, like, the southern coast. Lys is based on an island, it was the, like, pleasure colony of the Valerian freehold. So, like, it's like a lot of holidays, and they do prominently in the books. We keep on seeing it not in the show, both shows, that Lysini characters should look like Targaryens.
Yeah.
But they don't.
Right.
Not all of them, but yeah, so that was kind of like the holiday home of the Targaryens. So they have a lot more bastards there. So a lot of the Valyrian blood carries on through them. Then we got the Tyroshi, who are... So Dario, remember Dario from Game of Thrones? He's Tyroshi, but in the books, Tyroshi are very famous for dyeing their beards and dyeing their hair like orange and blue.
Oh wow!
And that's it's kind of based off what is the place again? The place with the snails, because Tyros has snails.
The place with the snails.
For ancient history, you know, snails that make dye.
Yeah.
What was it? What place was it? It wasn't Troy, was it? No. An island city on the eastern side of the Mediterranean. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, it's based off.
Yeah.
So they have like snails. Their main thing is textiles. They export a lot of textiles. And then we've got Myr, which is slightly more northern, about in line with King's Landing, so reasonably warm but can still get quite cold.
Okay.
Which we see Myr a lot in the first season of Game of Thrones, because that's where Dany and Viserys are living. With with the trade man. That's Myr. So they all ally together to stop fighting over an area called the Broken Lands, which is like the borderland between them. So they kind of have, all the three cities kind of have a Italian city-state kind of vibe.
Okay, yeah.
So they hire mercenaries to fight mercenaries, and that's about it. Like, they never really fight directly themselves.
Yeah.
So they ally together, stop fighting over that land, unify for about 50 years. And then they decide to invade this area called the Stepstones, which I'm sure you could put a map up showing where they are. Which is between Dawn and Tyrosh. It's these bunch of islands that were said to be a land bridge at one point, and how the first man got onto Westeros. But it's been filled with pirates because it's on a major shipping route, because it's the only way to get from the Narrow Sea to the Summer Sea.
Got you.
So the Narrow Sea is the sea between Westeros and Essos. So we've got the major trading cities like not Old Town and Nannisport are on the other side, but we've got Gulltown, King's Landing, Maidenpool, Dustinport, and White Harbour. They're all on this coast. These are three of the cities in the realm on this coast. The other two biggest cities on the other coast. So yeah, they've taken over. The pirates are getting really annoying. So the Triumphant takes over with their ship, and we got the Crab Feeder. He's a Tyroshi admiral. So they take over. At first, they're just charging little bits for the ships. They're like, give us a penny, you can go past. We're keeping the place clear of pirates, and most traders are for it.
Yeah.
But then they get more and more expensive, and then they start demanding captives, because Lys is known for its sex slaves. So they start taking little boys and little girls and slaves, and so then they get more and more demanding. And then the Crab Feeder then decides he'll be his own king. So he declares himself the king of the Stepstones. So this is the point we're at the moment. That's the bit we see at the end with Daemon and Corey's talking. They are a little bit spoilery, because the show is now making out like, they're going to ally together to take out the series.
Yeah.
They're not. they're going to go down to the Stepstones and take over the Stepstones.
Ah, okay.
And Daemon will become king. But we'll see.
So would you say that's kind of like how kind of Daenerys conquered kind of more of the region that she was in before getting the Iron Throne? That kind of, that's what he's trying to do?
No, it's never seen as that in the books. We've not seen it yet. The episode might do it differently. It's kind of just seen. It's kind of just seen as him wanting to do something. He's bored.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, and then with Corey's, it's a lot more about trade with him.
Right, got you.
For those two, because he's Daemon is very good at bringing, because he's so like courageous and brave. A lot of people flock to him, as we see with his gold cloaks, and a lot of people will flock to him. A lot of like knights that haven't seen much.
Yeah.
Like as we mentioned, tawny knights and actual knights. They're all knights. It's just tawny knights haven't seen much combat. So a lot of these knights will rush to him to get a bit of combat because it's been such a long reign of peace since Jaehaerys took over, the king before the series. I think it's been the only war so far in the Targaryen realm was the there's a semi-clash between Maegor, who was Aegon's second son, and Aerys, and then Aerys' children, Aegon, Rhaenyra, Jaehaerys, and Alicent. And also with Maegor and the Faith. So that was about 20 years into the Targaryen realm. Okay. Not realm. What am I trying to say? Reign. 20 years into Targaryen reign. And then, since then, there's been pretty much nothing war-wise. It's been very peaceful. So it's been about 150 years of peace.
Okay.
So, like, yeah, people get a bit... There's been little bits, as there always will, but there's no kingdoms fighting. They haven't invaded Dawn in a while. Like, it's just a lot of peace, and people are annoyed. A lot of these martial type are annoyed by it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to see them invade there. Trying to think anything else really happens that's massively different in the books. Obviously, the Dragonstone thing doesn't happen, so we don't see the clash between Otter and Daemon in such a direct way. I'm not sure. I think it's before this time. At one point, Otto does get removed his hand, but it would have happened before now.
Yeah.
But then he gets brought back.
Okay.
So he gets seen as like overreaching, and he's buggered off for 5 years. But then Viserys really struggles to find a good hand to replace him.
Yeah.
So he never really gets brought thing. And then. Yeah, so we again as we mentioned last week, a lot of things are a little bit different in time. So by this time, Viserys was already married to Alicent Hightower, where now it's happening. Obviously, Alicent, we mentioned before, Alicent and Rhaenyra were never really friends. We see a lot from the Queen that never was. She's a really interesting character.
Yeah.
So she's half Baratheon, half Targaryen.
Got you.
Oh, there's a thing. We'll do it in more of the character of the week when we talk about Corlys a bit more. But the reason she's married to Corlys is because during a war in Dawn, there's some Dawnist rebels that take over. Not a massive war, but it's why Aemon, her father, is dead. He gets shot by a crossbowman.
Oh god.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's only like a war of like a few thousand.
Okay.
And Corlys is running it with Aemon. They're doing it together as like a joint operation. Again, Corlys with the navy supplying and him taking the land. So that's why they're kind of married together. Do we see anything else that's massively different? No, I can't think of anything else plot wise.
Yeah.
We'll do character of the week. Dragon of the week. Same two dragons. Yep. I really like the noises.
I did too. The kind of whale dolphin clicking.
Yeah, I think it worked. It's actually like so much scarier.
I thought that too.
Than actual like a roar. Because we never see any lizards that roar, so I think it kind of suits a bit more, a bit less of a stretch.
But they also, in that same sense, the Game of Thrones dragons all sounded the same in that sense, that they just had a roar
and or looked the same.
Yeah, true. Whereas these two dragons, even in their sound, were different, which I even like too. That even though they used the dolphin kind of clicks, they were kind of separate as well. One was a bit more kind of screechy, one was a bit more clicky kind of thing.
But Daemon's dragon was Aemon's dragon, the one.
Yeah.
Her mother's, the Queen Everyone's mother's dragon in that war.
Ah, I see.
So that dragon and Daemon's dragon is known for being very used to combat.
Yeah.
At this time in the history, so by the start of the Dance of Dragons, which we're going to see, there's about 14 dragons. I don't think we're going to get all 14, to be honest. Some of them are a bit more important than others.
Budget reasons.
Yeah. But his dragon isn't the oldest. It isn't the biggest. There's one bigger.
Okay.
No, there's two bigger actually. But like, it is the most used to combat. In its short time, it's had the most time. We heard mentions of Vhagar, didn't we?
Yeah.
So in the book, Vhagar's just sat at Dragonstone napping all the time.
Oh, okay.
But clearly in this, they went, oh, he's not a Dragonstone. Because half the dragons are in the Dragon Pit, half of them are in Dragonstone. But it's like, it's not a Dragonstone, he's just wandering the narrow sea. We're clearly going to see Vhagar come back.
I was literally about to ask you that. The way
Vhagar
they kind
is
of
very important to the story.
Okay, interesting.
But Vhagar's a very big dragon at this time. It's the biggest dragon, the oldest dragon at this time.
Cool.
One of it's Viserys, Aegon the Conqueror's sister's dragon. And we are going to see him come back because there's a lot of good stuff with Vhagar.
Oh.
The main antagonist to Rhaenyra will end up riding Vhagar. Unless they change things, but yeah.
We shall see.
Right,
cool,
so there's our Dragonwatch. Obviously we see Rhaenyra's dragon again. And we do see the little fight on the bridge, which I think worked quite well. Because but I don't think that he would have ever fought Rhaenyra's.
I guess the thing is as well is that I think it would have been too early to have like a battle.
Also, he wants to shag her. Like
So I didn't kill her.
That's why. And they are quite close at this time. They're like, their family isn't huge, to be honest.
Yeah.
So they are very close at this time.
Yeah.
And they will become closer.
Ooh.
Without any more spoilers, right? What do we think of the history side, Luke?
Well, it wasn't obviously. It was a bit trickier this week because it wasn't as blatant as last week with the tournament. But one thing that we kind of mentioned last week, and I'm going to be shorter as well to not make this like an hour long, is that we kind of sprinkled it in last week about this kind of idea of female succession, female rule. And there's a really interesting thing that was it the Queen That Never Was? Is that it? Says to.
So we've got Rhaenyra's and Rhaenyra's and Rhaenyra's. I know it's...
Which one is it?
Rhaenyra's is the princess, the young princess, and Rhaenyra's is the old princess, I think. I get confused myself, to be honest.
Okay, well, the blonde one anyways.
Right, they're still both blonde.
Ah.
The old one.
Yes.
That's why everyone gives them nicknames. The Queen That Never Was.
So anyways, well, she says to her, she says something along the lines of like, men would rather die than see kind of like a woman on the throne.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be really interesting because it's kind of, there seems to be this theme, obviously we have in today's discourse about kind of female empowerment, there seems to be this kind of underlying topic of female rule and female power. Obviously in Game of Thrones you had Daenerys, very strong leader, but I feel like that they might...
I don't know why I disagree with you there, but yeah.
You do?
But she's a strong leader, yeah.
Well, okay, but she's a leader. But so I thought it'd be interesting to talk about in history an example of a woman who wielded a lot of power and one that was. So the top kind of the case study that we're going to be using is Adela of Blois, who lived from 1067 to 1137. Now, there's kind of about 5 reasons for her power, and I guess it'd be interesting to kind of reflect these reasons onto the characters to see how they match up. The first was bloodline. Adela of Blois was the youngest daughter of William the Conqueror, and she was the wife of Stephen Henry, the Duke of, who would be the Count of Blois, Chartres, Troyes, all sorts of various really powerful places, and he was the eldest son of Tybalt III. So she is basically, her brother is also the future king. So she's got a brother who's the future king, a dad who is king, and a husband who is extremely powerful. And she is kind of...
She also have a great nephew that becomes a king. Isn't that Stephen and something?
Yeah, I think so. So she's kind of almost the linking point of like 2 really powerful families of kind of kingship between England and France, two of the most powerful countries. And so in terms of bloodline, that in itself stood for a lot for Adela. And I guess when we talk about the Targaryens, that kind of idea of bloodline really plays into it. The next is, as I said, marriage. So Stephen, what's interesting as well is that Stephen afforded Adela a lot of power as well. Rather than putting her on the back seat and just saying, and just kind of holding this traditional concept of that you're going to make babies, he saw that she was an adequate rule. The reason for that was because when they married, Adela was 20 when Stephen was 40. So he understood that she will most definitely outlive him, which he ended up doing because he died on crusade. So he kind of
knew he should be running a regency.
Exactly. So she then went in kind of equal. And again, that's another interesting thing because obviously in Game of Thrones they talk about this kind of concept of the queen being the childbearing figure. That's kind of the primary role. So essentially what happens is that so Stephen dies. She kind of becomes regent and ruler. At this point she has two very young sons. It would not be for another 10 years, 15 years or so that her son would then take over at the age of 14. But she was well educated as well. And that's another big thing, is that she was more literate, more on it than Stephen was. And he understood that as well. So, you know,
as we've seen with Rhaenyra's.
Exactly. Yeah, and we see that in this episode where she kind of intervenes in the court rulings as well. And then we obviously have personality. So people admired her. We see even ecclesiasts such as Eva of Chartres really kind of recognize her as a great patron. Now, what's really interesting about Adela is that people such as Orderic Vitalis and other kind of chroniclers call her a lord rather than a lady. So that's interesting that these kind of gendered terms actually did have a bit of flexibility, that you could be afforded as a woman the same power as a man, and they saw her in that way. She was a great patron. She commanded men. She protested against the King of France. She intervened on a vast number of political, theological, and judicial affairs, and she just had so much committal power. Now, obviously, what typically happens in history is that the son then takes over and they stick their mum in a nunnery to be able to get rid of that. What we see with Adela is quite the opposite. When her son takes over, we see 25 charters being made from 1101 to 1109. This shows that she still attains that power, equal power. So in the same way that she ruled equally with her husband, she's now ruling equally with her son. So it'd be interesting, I guess, however the show may develop, whether rather than a sole female ruler, whether we see more of an equal rule between men and women. I don't know. But essentially, the idea is that she acted as a king would, as a lord would. She toured the domain, she dispensed justice, she defended the church, and people saw her as a lord, saw her as holding male power. Now, obviously, this is definitely unique. There's plenty of examples of women such as, I believe her name was Countess Margaret, and her husband, Count Charles, died in Bruges. He was assassinated, again in the 1100s, and she pretty much just went away into darkness.
I feel like a famous one is Eleanor of Aquitaine, causing her sons to rebel against her husband like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's like, God, after you've tried once, why you keep on going?
And I mean, with Eleanor of Aquitaine, she travelled to the Crusades because obviously Aquitaine produced and contributed a large number of troops, so she wanted to be seen as a military leader as well. So there are plenty of examples in history of women acting with the same, even more power than men.
But with Game of Thrones being like, there's the whole thing with the War of the Five Kings being very loosely based off the War of the Roses.
Yeah.
And the history being, I think, very mainly based off the English royal family. what do you think about like with female rulers taking over an English crown? Because obviously we had, wasn't Stephanie, was it? William the Conqueror's oldest son's daughter.
Oh my gosh.
The one that Stephen's mother. And then Henry takes back over, doesn't he?
That's a good question to which I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, right. So we have her. She's our first real English queen, kind
Yeah.
of, but she's never called one. I want to be called. She's called master or something, a magistrate or some weird thing. Like something, if I remember correctly, she's called something weird. And then we obviously don't get a queen for most of the medieval period.
Yeah.
Until the very end of the medieval period of what you see as medieval period and what most historians, which is Mary Tudor, our first real queen.
Yeah.
And after that, we get a lot more. But do you think they would have seen it in the same way? We've not had a queen, we can't have a queen kind of situation?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, obviously, in the case of Adela, I think what you have to understand is that obviously at the end of the day, she was just a countess, which in the hierarchy of the political hierarchy, isn't that really that far up.
Very varied in strength as well.
Some
countesses may be very weak, with some might be very strong.
Exactly. I mean, she is obviously got one of the most powerful areas of France. Her father is, of course, the King of England. Her brother becomes King of England, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, she's a countess. Getting towards then the Queen, that's a very different story because, of course, you do have elements of divine right of rule, which some countries take more seriously than others. And this kind of idea of that women in this period were somewhat weaker than men. Eve came from the rib of Adam. She is more likely to succumb to the devil. Is that something we want a queen to be?
Also, we have the king's main job, besides producing an heir, which is debatably, is to lead armies. Even as far as we see, with the Spartan kings, that was pretty much their only job. And Sparta actually had two kings at the same time.
Yeah.
And that was their only job with the Greek city-states, was to lead up. The political power was not in their hands. They'd sign off, they'd tick things, very similar to our current royal family. They'd tick the law, that's the law now.
Yeah.
And they'd just lead armies. So there's a big thing I know with seeing a woman lead an army. But obviously in House of the Dragon, she's a dragon rider. She could lead an army. We see women lead armies. We see both of Aegon's sisters lead armies. We see Jaehaerys' sister leading an army. Both of his sisters, one of which he marries. So we see women lead armies. So I don't know what they're scared about as much.
Yeah. No, that's definitely, I think.
And we don't have we have the faith of the new gods, the faith of the seven deities. But there's no real scripture written down for that. We don't there's little bits that we pop every now and again, but it's not been it's not as much as say Lord of the Rings, where he's written out the whole religious aspect of it. Because Gur is wants to be referred to, focuses a lot more on the politics side of things. But there isn't much resistance to having a queen. There isn't any religious. Because we already have the article of exception is done, which means Targaryens don't have to follow normal religious rules.
Of course.
So they already have that exemption.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if maybe in the case that it's kind of similar, and this is where I guess perhaps politics meets culture. Because whilst it might be in the politics and the scripture,
that's one thing we'll see is because the world of Westeros is made up of, it's not one culture group.
Yeah.
It's the 7 kingdoms.
Yeah.
Which is actually 8 or 9 kingdoms. As soon as Dawn joined, it becomes 9. Which is, so Westeros has 9 distinct major culture groups in it, with some little culture groups within those culture groups.
Yeah.
And we will see her allies and her enemies' allies, who we're not going to mention yet because it's not come up yet, later on in the war, come from specific culture groups. Which ones do you reckon it would be?
I'm too scared to say in case I get it wrong, because I know I will get it wrong.
She gets fewer than the other guy. So just name 2 of the.
Okay.
So we've got the North, the Iron Islands, the Riverlands, the Vale. Dawn's not part of the 7 Kingdoms yet. The Reach, the Westerlands, and the Stormlands and the Crownlands.
The North?
Yeah.
And the bit that's south of Dawn?
No, because Dawn doesn't really get involved. They're not part of the kingdom.
Got you. Go on.
I think
Indulge.
the other one is a large part of the Vale, which is weird because.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But the Vale very often ends up having female rulers.
Ah, I see.
And Rhaenyra's mother is from the family of the leading family of the Vale. Right, have you got any more on the history side, Lukey darling?
No, that is it for now.
We see a lot better armour wise, don't we?
Oh yes, I
Out
saw.
of that 7 knights.
I don't want to preempt anything, but I did see a still from the trailer of the next episode, and I saw a lovely gorget that Damon was wearing. Now I feel like I do want to make like some merch that says like, I don't know, bigger the gorget the better or something like that.
Bigger the gorget the better.
It's going to become. I feel like it's now going to become a running thing. We need a new segment like Spot the Gorget. But yeah, so it seems.
But what if they all end up having gorgets?
Then it's.
You'll be happy, man.
I will.
You can die happy, yeah.
But
right.
yeah, so yeah, definitely armor's getting better.
So we've got our character of the week, which is Corey's Valerian. So he is a very famous trader and seafarer. He does his first journey when he's 6 with his uncle to Mere from his island where he comes from, which is Driftstone. I can't think it now. And then he ends up like basically as a team becoming a very proficient and does his first solo journey at like 14. And then he goes on these journeys. They're called the 9 voyages of the sea snake because his nickname is the sea snake.
Yeah.
And he basically travels the whole of the known world of Westeros. Further, like some of it is more known than others because some of it like is passed on. But he goes all the way to Karth, all the way to Ashai, all the way. He does a northern trip and goes all the way to Ib, which, if you put if people Google the Game of Thrones map, you'll see that it's a massive journey. And on his last voyage, I think he has 20 ships. When he goes to Karth, trades out all of his stuff for 20 ships, comes back with his 20 ships filled to the brim with the most rare things in Westeros, and elephants. Not all the ships make it back, and nor do the elephants. But he becomes in these 9 voyages. He goes from a reasonably powerful family because they're quite close to the Targaryens. They're literally the island next to it. Driftmark. That's it. Driftmark. They're literally the island next to it. They've been quite close. They're friendly, and now they're friends. Are now the kings. But before that, they were quite weak. To goes from like what I would call a moderate minor power kind of thing to the richest lord in the realm. Wow. Richer than the Tyrells and the Reach with all their farms, richer than the Lannisters with all their gold. And he carries on trading, and this becomes a thing. So he becomes very famous, and then he also does a few of the little minor wars. He's very eager to get involved in them. He's just very prominent in the realm. That's why we see him as a master of ships. But at this time, he's actually not the master of ships. He's disagreed with Viserys a few times. He goes back and forth being master of ships. But it is a title that's very much seen as being held hereditary by his family. It's not officially, but so many members of his family have done it that it's seen as that way. He's named after his uncle or his great uncle, who was the first Lord Commander of the King's Guard. But yeah, they've always been very prominent within the Targaryen family. They marry in a lot. But yeah, he's a very, very well-known man in his time. And he's one to keep an eye out for. Yes. We're going to see a lot of Habsburgian breeding. And
classic.
So we'll see that a lot coming through. But yeah.
Brilliant. Well, there we are. Another great episode, I'd say.
Yeah.
It was a very good episode. I liked it a lot. It
seemed a lot more polished.
Yes.
I thought in the first episode.
Definitely.
Especially with the scenery. The acting, fine in the first episode. But clearly it's not a pilot. They could put a bit more budget in.
Yeah.
And yeah,
it'd be interesting to see actually what the budget increase was from the first to the second episode.
Well, the thing is, it may be the same budget, but then they already had all the other stuff built, so then they can.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
because they've already like the thing is, if you got the same budget for every episode, you can add on, can't you? So
true.
But yeah, armor was a lot more polished, I thought, from the bits of armor we did see.
Yes, no, definitely. I was more than happy with it.
Yeah. Better than most things nowadays.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks for listening to us.
Make sure to look at the previous episode. Make sure to look at other episodes about history, about interviews and all the other stuff.
And we will be carrying on this series.
We definitely will be. Whew. How many episodes is there Game of Thrones?
Normally they go 10 a season.
And there was, 60 in total?
68.
So we're going to be doing this until we are about 30.
Yeah.
Pound it. Cheers for watching.